The air in the Blackwood Cemetery was a chilling tapestry of damp earth and decaying rose petals. Above the wrought iron gates, the moon was a perfect, bruised crimson sphere, the blood moon, casting long, skeletal shadows over the moss-covered tombstones. Evelina Vlakis, draped in velvet the color of aged wine, stood beside the gaping hole she had prepared. Her eyes, luminous and sharper than any mortal steel, were fixed on the central object, a coffin of polished obsidian lined not with silk, but with pulsating blue-white light. The light was the heart of the ritual, a contained magical energy drawn from the blood moon itself. She had waited 7 centuries for this alignment, for this single night when the veil between life and eternity was thinnest. She didn't feel the cold. She didn't feel the thrill of the hunt. She felt only the crushing weight of her responsibility. If the ritual failed, her ancient lineage, the Vlakis name, would vanish from history forever. A low, hurried sound approached from the shadows. Evelina turned, her movement too fluid, too swift for a human. The man she had brought was not struggling. He was mesmerized. Cale Thorne, a university student with a mind full of dusty lore and a heart too eager for adventure, was walking towards his fate. She had lured him here with a whisper of a forgotten tomb and a promise of historical truth. He was wearing the dark clothing he was instructed to wear, and his eyes, usually bright with curiosity, now held a glazed, obedient look, a small price for the purity of his rare blood. He stopped exactly where she had willed him, beside the open coffin. Evelina. His voice was soft, laced with a strange, hypnotic devotion. He only knew her as an exotic, alluring collector of dark artifacts. Cale, she responded, her voice a deep, resonant cello note. The moment is upon us. She gestured toward the obsidian box. Lie down. You must rest now. He did not hesitate. He stepped over the edge and settled himself into the glowing space, his hands crossed over his chest, his expression calm and accepting. The strange blue light immediately wrapped around him, shimmering around his veins, a subtle magic confirming the purity of the sacrifice. Evelina gazed down at him. Even in this compromised state, he was striking, a sharp jawline, thick dark hair, and an undeniable vitality that pulsed against the cold stone of the graveyard. He was not just a means to an end. He was a vessel of life, a burning wick she was about to extinguish. A faint, almost forgotten emotion, akin to regret, brushed the edge of her immortal soul. He is perfect, she thought, and this must be done. She reached out, her pale hand tracing the lines of his face. 2 thin trails of electric blue energy, drawn from the coffin's lining, snaked out and wrapped gently around Cale's neck and wrist, anchoring him to the ritual. The magic was flowing now. The time for sentiment was over. Evelina lifted her skirts and, with the practiced grace of centuries, lowered herself into the coffin beside him. The space was tight, forcing their bodies into an unnatural intimacy. Cale's warmth was the first thing she noticed, a stark, shocking contrast to her own eternal chill. His heartbeat was a loud, frantic drum against the silence of the cemetery. The blue light intensified, creating a barrier between them and the living world. The scent of his pure, untainted blood was overwhelming, intoxicating her centuries-long control. She lay close, her mouth inches from his ear. She could feel his steady breath hitching. For one night, she whispered, her voice laced with the ancient power of the Vlakis line, we share this space. Your life for my eternity. She did not close the lid immediately. She paused, looking at his face one last time. In his eyes, the hypnotic glaze was beginning to crack, replaced by a flicker of true awareness, of dawning horror. Evelina, what are you? He managed a choked, terrified question. She pressed a finger to his lips, her crimson fingernails stark against his skin. It has begun. With a smooth, silent effort, she pulled the heavy, carved obsidian lid over them. Darkness descended, total and absolute, broken only by the shimmering blue-white pulse of the magic that now fully encased their shared tomb. The sound of Cale's rapid breathing was trapped inside with her. The ritual was in motion. The blood moon was at its peak. But as the forbidden energies began to fuse their destinies, Evelina felt a sudden, powerful pull, a connection that went deeper than the simple transfer of blood. It was a searing shock of shared consciousness, a feeling that shattered the iron control of her immortal existence. This was not the simple, clean sacrifice the ancient texts promised. The ritual was bonding them, not just killing him. As the first hour passed inside the glowing coffin, the human warmth radiating from Cale began to feel less like a temporary vessel and more like a necessary anchor to a life she thought she had long forgotten. This night, Evelina realized with a deep, unsettling dread, will not end as planned. The ancient magic of the blood moon ritual was a symphony of agony and ecstasy inside the obsidian sarcophagus. It was not the silent, surgical transfer of life essence that Evelina had prepared for. Instead, it was a volatile, violent merging. The pure, vibrant life force of Kale was being drawn out, not just as sustenance but as an ingredient, a catalyst for the renewal of her lineage. Yet, the same magic, energized by the unique alignment of the cosmos and Kale's incredibly rare, untainted blood, was simultaneously knitting their very souls together. Evelina had performed rituals before, but nothing like this. Her control, honed over centuries, was fracturing. She felt Kale's fear, sharp and immediate, but she also felt his curiosity, his deep academic fascination with the very magic that was killing him. She felt the searing heat of his life against her eternal cold, and for the first time since her turning, her own dead heart gave a phantom, painful thump. She tightened her grip on the final thread of her willpower. He must not survive the night, she repeated like a mantra. The Vlacus line demands it. My existence demands it. The blue light inside the coffin pulsed faster, mirroring the frantic rhythm of Kale's heart. He was struggling now, not physically but internally. His eyes were wide in the impenetrable darkness, seeing not the enclosed space but the rushing tapestry of her endless memory, the fall of empires, the hushed elegance of bygone centuries, the quiet, terrifying solitude of immortality. I see you, Kale choked out, the words vibrating through the wood and into her own chest. The isolation, it's a cage. His awareness was too strong. The bond was allowing him access to her mind, to her soul. She recoiled, pushing her body away from his warmth, trying to break the contact, but the magic held them taut. Her fangs descended, not in hunger but in pure, instinctual defense. She needed to complete the final, lethal step, to break his neck before the bond became irreversible. But the moment she raised her arm, a memory flashed into her mind that wasn't hers. Kale, alone in a dimly lit library, passionately arguing about forgotten myths, his eyes blazing with the same intellectual hunger that had once driven her own human life. The beauty of his vibrant passion stalled her. He is not merely blood. He is a consciousness. The blood moon began its descent. The ritual was nearing its conclusion. Evelina needed to make a choice. Complete the ancient pact and lose a piece of her soul to this agonizing bond, or defy eternity itself. A deep, resonating crack echoed from the outside world, muffled by the heavy lid. A shadow had fallen over the cemetery. Silas. The external threat provided the distraction she needed. Evelina shoved the agonizing choice aside. She needed strength, and the ritual, even incomplete, had already granted her the essence. With a final desperate surge of will, she channeled the blue energy, forcing it to absorb only the life essence necessary for the renewal, but she abruptly halted the lethal drain. She did not break the bond, nor did she complete the sacrifice. She left him in a dangerous, suspended state. The obsidian lid was thrown back with a violent screech, sending damp soil scattering. Evelina rose, her face stark white, her lips stained with a single drop of her own blood that had been jarred loose during the intense process. The air that rushed into the coffin was cold, but it felt liberating. Kale was still alive. Barely. His skin was translucent, the blue light having faded, leaving a faint, silver sheen. His breath was shallow but present. The ritual had taken enough to empower her, but not enough to kill him. The blood bond, however, was now a permanent, invisible chain linking them. Standing over the freshly unearthed sarcophagus was Silas. He was taller than Kale, cloaked in ancient black leather, his face severe, his silver eyes narrowed in furious disapproval. Evelina, Silas's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. The blood moon wanes. The sacrifice is incomplete. I can feel the life still clinging to the vessel. Evelina stepped fully out of the coffin, planting herself between Silas and the near-dead Kale. The renewal is complete, Silas. The Vlacus line is secured. My methods are not your concern. Insolence, Silas spat, his gaze raking over Kale. You defied the ancient laws for him? A frail, common mortal? His blood was meant to be entirely ours, not merely sampled. His fate is my own, Evelina stated, her voice regaining its cold, imperious authority. The power she had absorbed from the partial ritual surged through her, giving her the strength to face him. The pact I made with the council secures my line's future, not yours. You swore to protect me, not to judge my execution of the ancient rites. Silas took a deliberate step closer, his eyes burning. I swore to preserve the dominance of the ancients, not to watch the last of the purebloods weaken herself with sentiment. Look at the bond you have foolishly forged. He lives, Evelina. And a mortal who shares the soul side of an ancient vampire is a threat to our entire secrecy, a dangerous anomaly. Evelina knew he was right. The bond was a catastrophe. Kale's continued existence broke every law of the vampire courts. She looked down at Kale, whose eyes had fluttered open, dark and depthless, staring straight at her, no longer with terror, but with a confused, intense understanding. He saw her, the real her, the centuries of her life laid bare by the soul bond. He is no threat, Evelina declared, though her certainty was shaken. He is now a part of the Vlachis history, bound by the very magic that sustains me. I will contain the damage. You cannot contain what you have created, Silas hissed, a predatory smile stretching his lips. The courts will demand his total annihilation, and they will see your defiance as weakness. Give him to me, Evelina. I will finish the ritual and restore order. Evelina's choice was brutally clear. If she allowed Silas to kill Kale, she would complete the sacrifice and secure her place among the ancients, but the betrayal would shatter the nascent bond, tearing a piece of her soul away in the process. If she protected him, she declared war on the ancient court and placed Kale in the center of an immortal battlefield. With a decisive, echoing movement, she knelt and lifted the severely weakened Kale from the coffin, cradling his fragile, silver-sheen body against her dark velvet. He is under my protection, she told Silas, her voice a final, unshakable decree. You will not touch him. Tell the council I have secured the Vlachis line, and I have found my consort. The rules have changed. Eternity has changed. Silas's face contorted in a silent snarl of rage. He knew he could not challenge her now, empowered as she was by the renewal ritual. You have sealed your fate, Evelina. And his. You have traded your safe immortality for a brief, bloody war. He melted into the deep shadows of the cemetery, the threat a palpable poison on the night air. Evelina stood alone, holding the fragile life that had inadvertently saved her soul. Kale, resting against her chest, whispered a single lucid word, a name only she knew from her deepest memories. Listen. Evelina stared into the rising dawn, the pink light a terrifying enemy. She had kept Kale alive, but now she had to keep him safe from an entire world that wanted him dead. And she had to figure out what to do with the strange, deep love that the blood bond had forced into her undead heart. Evelina did not wait for the dawn to rise fully. The pale glow was already an agonizing threat, not to her power but to the severely weakened Kale. She flew not with bat wings, but with an inhuman speed that blurred the ancient tombstones into streaks of gray. Kale, unconscious and impossibly light in her arms, was a precious, volatile cargo. Her sanctuary was not the ancestral castle. That would be the first place Silas would look. Instead, she took him to a forgotten townhouse in the city's oldest, most desolate district. It was a crumbling stone edifice, masked by thick ivy and layers of anti-magical wards she had painstakingly woven over centuries for just such an emergency. It was a place where human life rarely ventured, a pocket of silence in the city's roar. She laid Kale gently on a bed of dark, crimson velvet in the master suite. His skin was still translucent, almost silvery, a testament to the life force the ritual had consumed. The true horror, however, lay beneath the surface. The blood bond was a relentless, low-level thrumming in her veins, an echo of his own fragile heart. She could feel his pain, his disorientation, and the frightening fragility of his human life. If he died now, the shockwave through the bond would not kill her, but it would shatter her sanity, permanently destabilizing the power she had gained. She needed him alive not just for the bond, but for the strange, unsettling connection to her past that his presence had unearthed. Kale shifted, letting out a small, weak moan. Evelina was instantly at his side. Listen, he whispered again, his eyes still closed. Why did you leave? Evelina drew back slightly, her face a mask of ancient torment. Listen. The name belonged to a mortal she had loved, a warrior from the 12th century whose memory she had painstakingly purged from her mind centuries ago. How could Kale know that name? The blood bond was not just a chain, it was a key unlocking her deepest, most guarded secrets and projecting them into his consciousness. She took his hand. It was cold, too cold. She needed to stabilize him. Traditional vampire nourishment, blood, would kill him in his current state, overloading his system. She needed to infuse him with enough of her own power to mend the deep physical trauma without turning him. She cut her own wrist, a rare, deliberate act of pain, and brought the pulsing wound to his lips. Drink, Kale. Not life but strength. Kale, driven by a primal need the bond had instilled, drank sparingly. The infusion was instantaneous. A faint blush of color returned to his cheeks, and the frantic flutter of his pulse calmed. He was now slightly infected with her immortality, but still profoundly human. The bond tightened, the invisible chain now forged in fire. As Kale drifted into a deeper, healing sleep, Evelina stood by the window, gazing out at the hostile, awakening world. She was the last of her line, and she had just committed treason against the only structure that governed their eternal existence. She activated a hidden communication ward, a shimmering web-like pattern in the air. A low, distorted voice answered, the voice of her most trusted, but equally cautious ally. Evelina. Silas is already mobilizing the Crimson Guard. They know the human lives. They suspect the bond, the voice whispered. They suspect, but they do not know the depth, Evelina replied, her voice steady. They must believe I intend to turn him, to keep him under my command. It is the only justification they might accept for my defiance. And is it your intention? Evelina glanced back at Cale, whose chest rose and fell in a steady, life-affirming rhythm. I do not know what my intention is, Isolde. Only that he lives, and that he is safer with me than dead. Find out where Silas is moving and who he is petitioning in the council. We need time. She broke the connection. Time. The one thing mortals cherished and immortals squandered. She had very little of it. Later that evening, Cale awoke. He didn't scream, didn't panic. He simply looked at Evelina with wide, intelligent eyes that now held a deep, unnerving understanding. He knew everything. He had seen the truth of the graveyard, the coffin, and the centuries of her life. You saved me, Cale said, his voice husky and weak. I did, Evelina admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed. A risky, foolish move. But necessary. What? He asked. The ritual. It was meant to kill me. You needed my life for your renewal. Why stop? Evelina stared at the lines of fate woven into the velvet sheets. Because the ritual did not follow the text. It created a bond, Cale. A profound, soul-deep connection. If you die, I will survive, but my eternity will be compromised. I am tied to you now. And listen? Evelina flinched. That is not your memory. That is mine. A ghost of my humanity, the bond dredged up. No, Cale insisted, his weak grip on her hand surprisingly firm. It felt like our memory. Like something I almost remembered from a lifetime ago. You look at me with the eyes of someone who recognizes a ghost. The thought was maddening, but the blood bond was blurring the lines between his life and her history. You are a threat to my world, Cale, Evelina said, her voice dropping to a warning tone. The beings who rule the night will hunt you down because you defy their laws. They will hunt me down for protecting you. We are both fugitives now. Cale looked around the beautiful, suffocating room. So, we shared a coffin for one night, and now we share an eternity of running? He managed a weak smile, a strange blend of terror and acceptance that Evelina found both exasperating and utterly captivating. He was not broken. He was simply adapting, his academic curiosity overriding his fear. I need to know everything, he whispered. Your world. The courts. Silas. If I am to be your consort, your ally, I need to understand the war you've dragged me into. Evelina gazed at the first genuine smile she had seen on him. She had meant to secure her future by killing him. Instead, she had gained a mortal anchor, a soulmate she was forbidden to have, and a war she was forced to fight. Very well, Cale Thorne, she conceded, the name tasting strangely sweet on her tongue. I will teach you how to survive the night. But know this, every lesson brings you closer to becoming one of us, and every step we take together draws Silas's blade closer to your throat. The game had begun. The fragile, beautiful connection they shared was now their only weapon and their greatest weakness. Evelina's townhouse was less a safe haven and more a gilded prison. The powerful wards kept out the prying eyes of the mortal world and the ancient magics of the vampire court, but they also created a sense of suffocating isolation. Inside, the world was dark, illuminated only by the flicker of gaslight and the occasional surge of Evelina's inherent power. 3 nights passed. Cale's recovery was astonishingly fast, a direct result of the minute amount of Evelina's blood flowing through his system and the constant connection of the blood bond. The silver sheen had faded, but a new sharpness had entered his eyes. He slept lightly, and when awake, he devoured every piece of information Evelina reluctantly offered. The greatest threat to a vampire is not the sun, Cale, but boredom and discovery, Evelina explained, pacing the long velvet-lined drawing room. For you, the threat is always discovery. The Council's central law is the veil, absolute separation from the human world. Your existence, alive and bonded to an ancient, shatters that veil. Silas will use that. She stopped before him, her long crimson skirt swirling. You need to know the rules of our war. Our kind does not fight with swords anymore. We fight with secrecy, influence, and ancient law. Your only defense is silence and understanding. Cale, now sitting upright and stronger, wore a determined, though still pale, expression. Silas called you my consort. Is that the lie we tell the council? It is the only acceptable lie, Evelina confirmed. A consort is a turned companion, entirely under the vampire's command, a possession. It implies you pose no threat of revealing our world. The council is obsessed with hierarchy. They may tolerate a consort. They will never tolerate a defiant bond with an untouched mortal. But I'm not turned, Kale pointed out. If they find out, the lie crumbles. They will test you, Evelina warned, her eyes intense. They will send emissaries. You will fail the traditional tests of a fledgling, so we must anticipate the advanced ones. They look for obedience, ruthlessness, and the complete absence of human sentiment. You must act as if I drained your humanity along with your blood. The intensity of her words created a visceral reaction in Kale. The blood bond, which was always a low hum, suddenly spiked. He felt a flash of her terror, the same fear she had felt moments before closing the coffin lid. He realized the lie wasn't just for the council, it was a desperate attempt to protect her own emotional sanity. Tell me about Silas, Kale pressed, trying to focus on the external threat. Silas was my family's advisor, Evelina said, turning to gaze at a portrait of her family's crest. A coiled serpent drinking its own blood. He desired the renewal ritual not to save my line, but to steal its pure blood power and lead the courts into an overt war against the mortals. He sees your survival as an insult and a power vacuum. Suddenly, a disturbance rippled through the air, a faint, metallic scent that only an immortal could detect. Evelina froze. The wards were intact, but something was trying to pierce them. An intruder, Evelina hissed, her voice dropping to a whisper. Not Silas, but a spy. Silas is testing my defenses. She pressed Kale against the cool stone wall, her body shielding him. Stay silent. Breathe shallowly. The spy will be looking for signs of a struggling mortal, a human pulse they can hear over the wards. They will be looking for you. The intrusion intensified. A tiny, almost invisible fissure of cold, dark magic appeared near the main door. It was a projection spell, an ancient method of spying through solid objects, used by the vampire court to bypass physical defenses. Evelina pulled a long, needle-thin silver knife from inside her sleeve. She didn't move towards the door. Instead, she locked eyes with Kale. The spy is looking for proof of your continued life. A sound, a scent, a flicker of heat, she instructed urgently. If they detect you, they will report back and Silas will send the Crimson Guard. Kale's heart was hammering, she could feel it through the bond, loud and frantic. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to mimic the stillness she projected, but the fear was uncontrollable. Evelina made a swift, agonizing decision. She clamped her hand over Kale's mouth, silencing his erratic breaths. Then, with her free hand, she plunged the silver knife into her own thigh, a shallow but instantly debilitating wound. The agonizing pain was a deliberate shock. The blood bond, sensing Evelina's sudden acute injury, instantly sent Kale's consciousness a wave of pure, unfiltered agony, overwhelming his own fear and physical sensations. Kale gasped silently against her hand, his body rigid, his internal panic instantly replaced by her pain. He was no longer thinking about his life, he was consumed by her trauma. The spy's projection flickered and then vanished. The metallic scent dissolved. Evelina slowly removed her hand, her face pale, the silver knife clattering to the stone floor. Silver was a bane to their kind, and the pain had been immediate and profound. What did you do? Kale whispered, his voice trembling, not from his own fear, but from the remembered sting of the silver. I felt everything. Evelina leaned against the wall, pulling the knife out and watching the wound close instantly. I used the bond to silence you, she explained, breathless. When you are in extreme emotional or physical distress, I can override your consciousness by inflicting a sharper, immediate pain on myself. The bond forces your senses to prioritize mine. For a mortal, a silver wound on an immortal is overwhelming. She looked at him, her eyes dark with a mix of fierce protection and cold calculation. You will be tested again, Kale. Next time the spy might be inside the room. You must learn to silence your pulse, your heat, your fear. You must learn to think like the dead. Kale did not look away. He finally understood the brutal reality of the immortality she offered. The bond was a weapon and she would use it against him, even hurting herself to save his life. The feeling of her pain, the sudden, terrible invasion of his senses, had been a far more effective lesson than any lecture. Show me, he said, his voice flat, his human fear finally quenched by the terror of their shared violent connection. Show me how to think like the dead. The following nights were a relentless lesson in deception and control. The opulent townhouse became a training ground, shrouded in silence. Evelina forced Kale to master the art of stillness, the eradication of his human noise. The subtle heat, the rapid pulse, the minute tremor of fear that would betray him to any skilled vampire tracker. Feel the bond, Kale, Evelina instructed, her voice soft but demanding. She stood yards away, her vampiric senses extended, listening for the faintest biological disruption. It is a current between us. Do not fight it. Use it. Pour your fear into my side of the bond. Let me carry the panic. You must be an empty vessel. Cale lay on the cold marble floor trying to mimic the stillness of the dead. He found that the only way to truly silence his thundering human heart was to focus entirely on Evelina's cold, steady pulse, a rhythm he could now distinctly sense through their terrifying connection. He used the bond to shunt his anxiety towards her, a psychic overload that caused Evelina's lips to thin in momentary discomfort, but she never broke her concentration. Better, she finally conceded on the fourth night, her silver eyes gleaming in the near darkness. You are learning to play the ghost. While Cale mastered stillness, Evelina focused on the external threat. The brief visit from the spy had revealed Silas's strategy. He was not attacking directly, but gathering proof of her transgression for the Council of Elders in the hopes of securing a sanctioned execution. Evelina communicated again with Isolde, her elusive ally. Isolde confirmed that Silas had petitioned the council, citing Evelina's failure to complete the ritual and the blasphemous blood bond as grounds for trial. The council, ancient and conservative, was skeptical of any disruption, but Silas's evidence was compelling. Silas is looking for something specific, Isolde, Evelina noted during their coded exchange. Proof that the bond is irreversible, or perhaps, a weakness in my lineage that the renewal ritual failed to fix. He seeks the chronicles of Lishan, Isolde replied, the sound crackling with urgency. The ancient record of the Vlachis line. It is believed to be hidden in the catacombs beneath your ancestral castle. It contains the true and possibly damning history of your ancestor, the original Lishan. Evelina's composure cracked. The name. Lishan. The ghost Cale had unknowingly evoked. She had spent centuries trying to forget that chapter of her life. He will use the past to destroy my present, Evelina hissed, slamming her fist on the stone table. The urgency of her action immediately spiked the blood bond. Cale, who had been resting in the adjacent room, appeared instantly, drawn by her sudden emotional distress. What is it? What's Lishan? He demanded, no longer weak or timid. His eyes held a strange, knowing fire. Evelina stared at him, realizing the futility of her secrecy. He would always know her turmoil. Lishan was immortal, she confessed, her voice thick with the dust of centuries. A man I loved 800 years ago, long before I became what I am now. He was the only one who ever saw beyond the hunger, the only one I ever considered turning. Did you? Cale asked, his gaze intense. No. He died a human death, believing I was a monster. The council even then was ruthless. They saw my love for him as a weakness, a contamination of the Vlachis purity. The chronicles are their proof. Evelina's memory flashed involuntarily, carried by the bond. A vivid, heartbreaking image of a young woman kneeling over a cold body, a pool of blood soaking into a dirt floor. Cale gasped, his hand flying to his chest, feeling the agony of that centuries-old moment as if it were his own. He didn't believe you were a monster, Cale breathed, shaking his head. He just believed you were too powerful to love him back. The depth of his understanding, drawn directly from her painful memory, unnerved Evelina. She needed to focus on the threat, not the tragic echo of her past. Silas believes the renewal ritual failed because of Lishan's lingering curse on our line. A weakness he claims I inherited, Evelina explained, pulling herself back to the present. If he gets those chronicles, he has the evidence to prove I am unfit to lead, and the authority to execute us both. Then we go to the catacombs, Cale stated simply, his fear now replaced by fierce, protective loyalty. If he needs the book to destroy us, we must get to it first. Evelina looked at the mortal man who was now her mirror, her shield, and her greatest vulnerability. He was still human, but the bond had gifted him with a vampire's conviction and a share of her eternal pain. It is a suicide mission, Cale, she warned. The castle is heavily warded, and Silas has guards on every entrance. Then we use the bond, Cale challenged. You taught me how to be a ghost. Now let me be your eyes and ears in a place that has only ever known your silence. The castle will be looking for a vampire intrusion, not a human with a shared pulse. Evelina saw the logic. The human element, her shame and weakness, was now their unexpected strength. They had to move. The council would convene soon, and Silas was already halfway to the castle. Very well, Evelina conceded, a predatory smile touching her lips for the first time in centuries. We will enter the castle from the outside, through the old servants' entrance beneath the west wing. You will move as my shadow. If they detect a heartbeat, I will stop it myself before they can report it. The plan was set. The forbidden couple would venture out of the safety of their warded house and into the deadly ancestral stronghold of the Vlachis, heading straight into a confrontation with Silas to retrieve a book that held the key to both their freedom and their destruction. The journey from the forgotten townhouse to the Vlachis keep was a blur of shadows and forced stillness. Evelina moved with a chilling, predatory elegance, a dark, flowing shape against the moonlit backdrop of the city's outskirts. Kale, clinging to her side, used the lessons she had brutally taught him. He channeled the frantic energy of his human heart into the shared bond, muffling his pulse and heat until he was nothing more than a faint, spectral presence beside the ancient vampire. As they approached the Vlakis keep, a looming Gothic monstrosity of black granite and razor-sharp spires, the air grew heavy with old concentrated magic. This was the heart of Evelina's power, and also the epicenter of Silas's vigilance. "The castle is alive, Kale," Evelina whispered, her voice a low vibration that only he could hear, thanks to the bond's heightened telepathic connection. "Every stone is key to the Vlakis lineage. It recognizes me, but it will also sense any unauthorized immortal presence. Silas has layered it with his own wards, specifically looking for my unique frequency." "And what about my frequency?" Kale projected mentally, the bond allowing him to communicate without moving his lips. "You are a discordant note," Evelina replied, guiding them swiftly toward the obscured servants' entrance beneath the west wing. "The castle will register a human presence, but its defenses are tuned against the undead. We must use your mortality as a cloak." The entrance was a narrow, moss-covered archway, shielded by a crumbling iron grate. Evelina effortlessly bent the ancient iron, the metal groaning a silent protest. They slipped into the darkness of the subterranean passages. The air was colder here, thick with the scent of stagnant water and centuries of dust. Suddenly, a faint, rhythmic sound echoed from the main passage ahead. Footsteps. Slow, measured, and definitely belonging to a vampire of the Crimson Guard. Evelina stopped, pressing Kale hard against the damp stone wall. "Guard. Right around the bend." His senses are extended. He is listening for any break in the silence. Kale knew what to do. He immediately focused on his breath, slowing it until his lungs barely moved. His heart threatened to pound out of his chest, but he forced the fear through the bond, pushing his panic toward Evelina. Evelina received the sudden spike of fear like a physical blow. She grimaced, the effort of absorbing his human terror momentarily costing her energy. But it worked. Kale's external fear signature dropped to almost zero. The guard, a hulking figure in a dark uniform, rounded the corner. He paused directly in front of their hiding spot, his nose twitching, his pale eyes scanning the darkness. Evelina acted instantly. She didn't attack. Instead, she performed a more subtle, terrifying maneuver. She reached out with her mind, channeling the power gained from the renewal ritual, and used the blood bond as a conduit to inject a sudden, powerful, and utterly alien distress into the guard's mind. The guard staggered, clutching his head, his focus shattering. He wasn't sensing Kale. He was suddenly overwhelmed by a psychic vision of 1,000 tiny silver knives slicing through his eternal essence. A direct projection of Evelina's trauma from the silver knife, amplified through the bond. "Anomaly," the guard muttered, shaking his head. "Flicker of pain. The wards are unstable." Concluding it was a system error, he moved on, continuing his patrol. Evelina let out a slow, silent breath. She looked at Kale, whose eyes were wide with shock. He had felt the projection. He had shared the terrifying wave of distress she had inflicted on the guard. "That is the power of our bond, Kale," Evelina explained, her voice low. "I can use our shared connection to project targeted, debilitating emotion onto others. They are looking for a physical threat. They will never anticipate a psychic attack drawn from my own pain, routed through a mortal." "You weaponized your trauma," Kale whispered, the realization both horrific and brilliant. "In this world, everything is a weapon," she countered. "Now we move. The catacombs are below this level. We must hurry before the guard alerts Silas to the ward's instability." They descended deeper into the earth, following winding staircases carved from the bedrock. The catacombs were a labyrinth of tombs and dusty archives. The smell of ancient parchment and dry bone was overpowering. Finally, they reached a reinforced vault door marked with the Vlakis crest. Evelina touched the stone, and the crest glowed briefly, recognizing her. The heavy door slid open with a grinding sound, revealing a vast, chilled library of eternal records. This was the archive of the ancients. In the center of the room, on a high lectern, was an object that instantly drew their attention. A thick, leather-bound volume secured with heavy silver chains. The Chronicles of Lishan. But the room was not empty. Standing before the lectern, his black cloak blending into the shadows, was Silas. He turned slowly, his expression a mixture of triumph and chilling disappointment. "I knew you could not resist, Evelina. You have always been foolishly sentimental about your past." Silas gestured toward the chained book. "The Chronicles are here, but I already know the key passage. The original Lishan, your first love, was not just a mortal. He was a seer, a human with the rare gift of prescience. He foretold the decline of the Vlachis line, claiming it would be weakened by the very ritual you just performed. He smiled thinly. He did not curse you, Evelina. He cursed your power. His prophetic blood warned that any Vlachis who performs the renewal ritual will be eternally bound to a soulmate that threatens the survival of our kind. You, Evelina, are bound to a flaw. Kale stepped forward, pushing past Evelina. The flaw is not the bond, it's the obsession with purity. You want to destroy her because she chose connection over cold isolation. Silas laughed, a dry, horrible sound. The human speaks. Do you think your pretty sentiments matter to the ancient laws? You are the flaw, mortal. You are the definitive proof that Evelina is unfit to rule, unfit to even survive. With blinding speed, Silas lashed out not at Evelina but at the lectern. He unclasped a heavy silver-tipped chain from the wall and threw it with precision, wrapping it around Kale's neck. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The silver burned Kale's skin, a searing, white-hot agony. The bond exploded. Kale's pain was amplified tenfold by his connection to Evelina's aversion to silver, and Evelina was immediately paralyzed by the psychic shockwave of Kale's mortal agony. The silver chain will hold your life essence and her power, Silas gloated. The flaw is neutralized. Now, Evelina, give me your surrender, and I will make your consort's death quick. Evelina fought through the crippling pain, seeing Kale choke on the silver chain, his face contorting in unbearable agony. Silas had anticipated the bond and used the ultimate countermeasure. Her greatest strength was now her undoing. The fate of their forbidden connection, and the truth of the Vlachis line, hung on the strength of a silver chain. The silver chain tightened around Kale's neck, a white-hot ring of agony that instantly crippled Evelina. The blood bond, their greatest creation, was now their shared executioner. Evelina felt Kale's every searing nerve ending, the impossible pressure on his throat, and the sudden, terrifying inability to draw a breath. She staggered backward, a silent scream tearing through her mind, the pain rendering her immense power useless. Silas watched with cold satisfaction, holding the loose end of the chain. The prophecy was clear, Evelina. The ritual binds you to a flaw. And the flaw, when subjected to silver, paralyzes the ancient. The Vlachis line ends here, corrupted by sentiment. Kale, despite the agonizing burn of the silver, struggled to focus. He heard Silas's words and, through the bond, felt the despair of Evelina's paralysis. He knew he couldn't break the chain physically, but he remembered Evelina's words. Everything is a weapon. He looked into Evelina's tormented eyes. He couldn't speak, but he pushed a single desperate thought through the bond, bypassing the wall of pain. Listen. Show him the memory. Evelina understood. Kale was asking her to weaponize not just her pain, but her deepest, most guarded trauma, the memory of Lishan's death, and project it onto Silas. The bond had revealed that memory to Kale. Perhaps it could force Silas to feel it too. With a final, shattering surge of will, Evelina ignored the silver-induced agony. She focused entirely on the centuries-old memory of Lishan's final breath, the moment her humanity died. It wasn't just sadness, it was a profound, raw violation of her being. She opened the floodgates of the blood bond and directed the torrent of ancient grief, pain, and self-loathing straight at Silas. The psychic attack was catastrophic. Silas dropped the chain, his face contorting in genuine shock and agony. He didn't just see the memory, he felt the centuries of isolation, the profound, endless regret, and the searing, eternal pain of a love lost. He was an ancient. His mind was strong, but he was unprepared for the raw, human depth of Evelina's guilt, amplified by the forbidden connection. Stop. Silas roared, clutching his head, momentarily stunned and overwhelmed by the sheer feeling of Evelina's soul. The moment the chain dropped, Kale collapsed, gasping for breath, the silver burn already blistering his skin. Evelina was instantly freed from the psychic paralysis. She moved with impossible speed. She didn't run. She grabbed a discarded, dust-covered iron candelabra. Iron, like silver, hurt vampires, but she was fortified by the renewal and driven by rage. She used the pain to focus her power, channeling it through the iron. Before Silas could recover from the psychic assault, Evelina brought the heavy iron down with all her vampiric force, smashing the thick, silver chain securing the chronicles of Lishan to the lectern. The silver snapped with a ringing crack, and the heavy book tumbled free. Silas snarled, recovering his senses. He lunged at her, his ancient strength fueled by fury, ready to tear her apart. You cannot defeat me with mortal tactics. He bellowed. Perhaps not, Evelina replied, her eyes burning with pure Vlachis power. But I can distract you. She seized the heavy, iron-bound chronicles and hurled the massive book directly at Silas's chest. The impact, reinforced by the touch of iron, was enough to stagger the ancient. Evelina didn't hesitate. She scooped up the still recovering Kale, his burned throat a horrifying sight, and bolted. "We have the book," she projected into his mind, her voice ringing with grim triumph. "But the castle is closing in. Silas will summon the entire guard." They raced through the catacombs, Evelina's focus entirely on escape. Kale, though grievously injured, was now entirely lucid. His experience of Evelina's pain had unlocked a new level of connection. The West Wing. The archive entrance. Kale mentally urged, projecting a clear, detailed map of the subterranean tunnels he had studied in the last few days. "Not the way we came. There's an emergency ventilation shaft leading to the old greenhouse." Evelina followed his mental directions without question. The bond had changed their dynamic. She was the power, but he was rapidly becoming the strategist, the mind that understood physical space and planning better than her centuries of tunnel vision allowed. They burst out of the grimy ventilation shaft into the shattered glass and dying greenery of the greenhouse. Above them, they heard the heavy sound of Silas's Crimson Guard mobilizing. "We need to disappear, Kale," Evelina gasped, finally slowing down. "Silas has seen the extent of the bond. He knows the danger. We can never return to the house." She opened the chronicles, its pages brittle and yellowed. She flipped rapidly, scanning the prophecy Silas had mentioned. "The prophecy of Lishan," she read aloud, her voice trembling. "The blood moon ritual shall bind the ancient Vlacus to the mortal seer, and the flaw shall be made whole. For the seer's blood is the key to the gate of shadow, and together they shall choose the fate of eternity, rule or redemption." "The gate of shadow," Kale whispered, touching his burned throat. "A way out? A neutral place?" "More than that," Evelina said, looking up at him, a terrible, thrilling realization dawning in her eyes. "The gate of shadow is the fabled gateway to the original dimension, the birthplace of our kind. Legend says it holds the power to reset our existence, to remove the curse of our immortality, or to unleash its full terrifying might on the mortal world." She slammed the book shut. "Silas wants to rule. He wants to take the ultimate power and force vampires into the sunlit world. But the prophecy states that only the bound ancient and the mortal seer can choose redemption. We are the only ones who can close the gate forever." The choice was clear. They could try to survive Silas's hunting parties, or they could end the war by confronting the source of all vampire power. They had shared a coffin, survived a ritual, and discovered a soul bond. Now they shared a purpose that transcended their forbidden love. "We need to find this gate," Kale stated, the pain in his neck nothing compared to the gravity of their mission. "Where does the book say it is?" Evelina's lips curled into a determined, grim smile. "The location is hidden. But the book says the gate is protected by 3 sanguine keys, hidden across the mortal world. We must gather them before Silas can decipher the full prophecy and hunt them down." The first week was a harrowing blur of movement. Evelina and Kale abandoned the sanctuary of the townhouse, knowing Silas would sweep the city. They traveled by night, avoiding all established vampire territories and relying on Kale's deep academic knowledge of ancient trade routes and forgotten spiritual sites. Evelina's vampiric resources, gold, influence, hidden currency, were now their only lifeline in the mortal world. The blood bond had fully matured into a dual-edged sword. It allowed them silent communication, acted as a shared warning system against surveillance, and let Evelina regulate Kale's still fragile condition. But it also meant their physical and emotional states were inextricably linked. Kale felt the chill of her immortal essence, and Evelina was constantly aware of his human vulnerability, the need for warmth, rest, and food. She had to hunt cautiously, always maintaining enough control to prevent the bond from transmitting her primal hunger to him. Kale's throat, burned by the silver chain, healed slowly, leaving a thin, white scar, a permanent mark of their shared ordeal. The Chronicles of Lishan became their most prized possession. Wrapped in thick, protective linen, it contained the cryptic verses detailing the locations of the 3 sanguine keys. The first key's location was hidden in a riddle, where the architect's last breath turned stone to sky, and the sun's pure heart is mocked by a frozen eye. There lies the key of the weaver, hidden deep, by the guardian whose slumber the mortal cannot keep. The architect, stone turning to sky, a tall structure, Kale mused, tracing the ancient script. And the sun's heart mocked by a frozen eye, an observatory? A clock tower? Evelina, whose centuries were a vast library of history, suddenly recognized the pattern. "It is the Celestial Tower of Belgrade," she stated grimly. Built in the 17th century by a master occultist known as the Architect, who was obsessed with capturing solar energy. The frozen eye refers to the unique, unblinking sapphire lens built into the spire's crown. It was meant to be a sanctuary for sun worshippers, a cruel mockery to my kind. The thought of traveling to Belgrade, deep within Eastern Europe where ancient vampire clans still held powerful influence, was dangerous. But the key was essential. The key of the Weaver, and the guardian whose slumber the mortal cannot keep, Kale continued. We need to find out what a Weaver is in occult terms and who the guardian is. Evelina pulled out a small, exquisite silver locket, a non-offensive, magically warded item. She activated a faint pulse. Isolde responded almost instantly. Belgrade is Silas's old territory, Evelina. He has contacts there, the Milos clan, Isolde warned. They are ruthless, territorial, and loyal only to power. They will be looking for a male human traveling with an ancient. They will report you instantly. We will be shadows, Evelina vowed. What do you know of the Weaver and the Celestial Tower's guardian? The Weaver is the first Vlacus, which Isolde explained. Your bloodline's forgotten ancestor, a mortal with immense weaving power who helped found the vampire line. The guardian is the tower's creator himself. It is said he didn't die. He used his occult science to enter a state of perpetual, guarded sleep within the tower's foundations. The next night they began the perilous journey east. Evelina had to use her speed and cunning to bypass border controls, often forcing Kale to rely solely on the silence taught by the bond to avoid detection by humans, whose paranoia was easily heightened by Silas's subtle disinformation campaigns. They arrived in Belgrade under a thick blanket of fog. The Celestial Tower dominated the skyline, a dark, ornate spike of black stone and brass. They found a hidden entry point in the tower's forgotten sub-basement. The air inside was thick and cold, scented with ozone and centuries of disuse. The key is hidden by the Weaver, Evelina reminded Kale, her voice low. The Weaver dealt in ancient, living cloth, tapestries that were themselves spells. We must look for a hidden cloth or thread. As they moved through the dusty tunnels, the blood bond suddenly flared, a clear, internal warning. Kale mentally projected the feeling of cold, organized malice. Two ahead, Evelina hissed, pulling Kale into the shadow of a crumbling archway. Milos clan. They are searching systematically. Silas anticipated this move. They overheard the harsh whispers of the two vampires. The ancient and the boy are here. Silas wants them alive, but we take the boy first. The silver chain left him weak. Evelina knew they couldn't fight them conventionally. The fight would alert the entire clan. She took the lead, moving silently toward a massive, cracked stone slab in the corner, which Kale immediately recognized from the architectural schematics in the chronicles as the entrance to the architect's chamber. The guardian is here, Evelina projected. The key must be inside. Draw their attention. Be the mortal distraction. Kale didn't argue. He knew his role. Taking a deep breath, he intentionally stumbled, knocking over a stack of dry wooden crates with a loud, echoing clatter. The two Milos vampires turned instantly, their attention drawn to the source of the human noise. The boy. Get him. One snarled. As they lunged toward Kale, Evelina pressed her hand against the stone slab and channeled a massive surge of her vampiric power into the architecture itself. The stone slab shuddered, and then, with a deafening, grinding roar, it slid inward, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, suspended in a translucent golden liquid, was a pale, sleeping man, the architect/guardian. His body was crisscrossed with glowing, intricate wires. But on the stone pedestal beside the chamber, lay the first key, a beautifully woven piece of dark, glowing tapestry no bigger than a glove. Evelina grabbed the tapestry. The moment her hand closed around it, the two Milos vampires screamed. The entire Celestial Tower seemed to come alive, and the Guardian's chamber snapped shut, trapping the Milos vampires inside the stone. Evelina's power, combined with the Weaver key, had activated the ancient occult trap. Go, now. Evelina commanded, pulling Kale up through a ventilation shaft. They burst out onto the roof just as the sapphire lens on the spire's crown began to pulse with a furious, mock-solar light, alerting the entire city to the unauthorized intrusion. They had the first key, but now the Milos clan and Silas knew their target. The hunt had escalated into an open race. Evelina and Kale found temporary refuge in a forgotten, dust-choked attic above a merchant's warehouse in an older quarter of Belgrade. The adrenaline from their escape had faded, replaced by the chilling reality of their situation. The first sanguine key, the Weaver's tapestry, lay on a tattered velvet cloth between them, a small, dark fabric constantly shifting with faint, internal light. The tapestry was more than cloth. It pulsed with a soft, persistent energy, echoing the rhythms of life and history. Through the blood bond, Kale could sense the residual consciousness of the Weaver, the ancient Vlacus which, a faint whisper of human power and sorrow. The key is not just a locator. It's a link, Evelina murmured, running a pale finger over the tapestry. The Weaver was a mortal who could map the threads of fate. We must use it to reveal the riddle of the second key. Kale, his scar throbbing, reached out and placed his hand beside hers. He focused his mind, using the stillness he had learned, and plunged his consciousness into the shared space of the bond. He wasn't looking for answers, he was feeling the tapestry through Evelina's senses. Suddenly, the tapestry surged, and a wave of images flooded Kale's mind. Ancient looms, intricate knots, and the frantic movements of a woman trying to weave time itself. When the vision cleared, the next riddle from the Chronicles seemed to illuminate itself in Kale's memory. Where the sun sleeps in gold, yet the desert burns cold, and the merchant's sin is forever untold, lies the key of the mirror hidden high, beneath the eye that watches the stars go by. The desert burns cold, the sun sleeps in gold, Kale repeated, shaking his head slightly. That's a contradiction. A desert is hot. Sun sleeps in gold, suggests sunset or a place rich in gold, but burns cold, is impossible. Evelina, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, drew on her vast memory of the world's most mysterious locales. Gold and cold. The Atacama Desert in Chile. It is one of the driest places on Earth, Kale, and the temperatures plummet to below freezing at night. It's a land of extremes. And the wealth? The ancient civilizations there buried vast amounts of gold. And the merchant's sin? Kale pressed. And the eye that watches the stars? The Atacama is famous for its astronomical observatories, Evelina concluded, her voice gaining speed. The eye is a massive telescope. The merchant's sin. She paused, a shadow crossing her face. The Vlachis line was founded on more than just power, it was built on a monumental act of theft. My ancestor, Lishan, was betrayed by a powerful merchant guild who stole a precious artifact, the original mirror key. The revelation tightened the blood bond between them, binding their purpose with the weight of ancient betrayal. We need to go to the Atacama, Kale confirmed. The observatories are modern, but the legend suggests the key is hidden beneath the eye. It must be a foundational structure, built over an older ruin. Before they could fully consolidate their plan, the bond screamed a warning. Loud, rhythmic footfalls approached the warehouse below. Not the cautious, hunting steps of the Crimson Guard, but the heavy, confident tread of the Milos clan. They tracked the magical residue from the tower, Evelina cursed, rising swiftly. They are cornering the building. They won't negotiate this time. They want us for Silas. The roof, Kale urged, moving to the fire escape. They won't expect us to run up towards the dawn. They burst onto the rooftop just as the Milos vampires scaled the fire escape below them. There were at least 5 of them, hulking, brutal figures determined to capture the Ancient and the Flaw. Evelina knew she couldn't outfight 5 vampires in close quarters while protecting Kale. She needed a decisive, crippling move. Kale, the Weaver's Tapestry. She commanded. Focus your mind. The tapestry is a weave of fate. Use the bond to project an image of what they fear most. Kale grabbed the tapestry. He closed his eyes and poured his focus into the bond. He reached deep into the psychic connection, not to Evelina's personal fears, but to the collective, deep-seated terror of all ancient vampires. Exposure to the sun. He used the tapestry as an amplifier. A blinding, illusory light, the color of midday sun, exploded in the minds of the approaching Milos vampires. It was not real, but the psychic shockwave, funneled through the bond and amplified by the tapestry, was crippling. The 5 vampires dropped, screaming silently, their eternal fear rendered impossibly real in their minds. Evelina didn't hesitate. She grabbed Kale and leaped to the next roof, moving like a dark, fast wind. Brilliant, Kale, she complimented, her voice a rush of pride and urgency. You weaponized the sun itself. They were safe for the moment, but the attack cemented their enemy's new ruthlessness. Silas was no longer playing politics. He was simply sending assassins. They had to reach the Atacama, a world away, and they had to be faster than Silas's network. We need a disguise and a distraction, Evelina said, pulling Kale into the deeper shadows of a covered market. They expect us to fly east or north. We go entirely counterintuitive. We need a ship. She looked down at the tapestry in her hand, then at Kale's scarred neck, and finally at the cryptic riddle for the second key. The game was no longer about survival, it was about global pursuit and the mastery of forbidden power. The journey from Belgrade to the remote region of the Atacama Desert in Chile was a masterclass in deception and endurance. Evelina shed her crimson attire, adopting the severe, practical clothing of a wealthy, globe-trotting archaeologist. Kale, still bearing the silver scar on his neck, played the role of her reserved, intensely focused research assistant. To avoid detection by air or conventional travel, method Silas's vast network would certainly be tracking. Evelina used a series of heavily warded cargo ships and underground conduits, moving them south across continents. The relentless pace and the harsh environments tested Kale's mortal limits. Evelina had to be meticulously careful, hunting for sustenance only when Kale was in a deep, protected sleep, ensuring the blood bond did not transmit her primal need or the brutal reality of her actions. Kale used the journey to study the weaver's tapestry. He discovered that by touching the ancient threads, he could use the bond to project a subtle, cloaking energy around them, a weave of silence, that momentarily scrambled modern surveillance and the rudimentary tracking spells of the Milos clan. When they finally reached the Atacama, the environment was as the riddle described, breathtakingly beautiful yet brutally harsh. The heat was scorching by day, but the nights, when Evelina was active, dropped into a bone-chilling cold. They located the area of the largest, most remote modern astronomical observatory, the eye that watches the stars go by. Kale, armed with schematics from the chronicles, identified an anomaly, a deep, dry well sealed beneath the observatory's central dome, indicating an older, forgotten structure below. The merchant's sin, Evelina murmured as they descended the well shaft into an airless, dust-filled vault. The stolen artifact. The mirror key must be a reflection of the crime. The vault was not a crypt, but a treasury. Ancient gold artifacts lay scattered on dusty pedestals, jewelry, crowns, and statues of immense value. In the center, however, was a perfectly preserved, life-size statue of a hooded man, eternally kneeling before a pedestal. This was the merchant who had stolen the key. On the pedestal, instead of a physical mirror, was an empty space that shimmered with residual energy. Kale's academic intuition flared. The key of the mirror is not the object itself, but its reflection, he realized. The merchant stole the original key, but the magic of the sanguine keys ensured its true location could only be found by reflecting the theft. The key is hidden in the object that was used to betray Lishan. Suddenly the air in the vault chilled and a voice, sharp, cultured, and laced with menace, echoed from the entrance above. A fitting location for a flaw to be revealed, Evelina. Treachery and hidden reflection. Silas stood at the top of the shaft, not alone, but flanked by two imposing figures of the Crimson Guard. He had used his resources and knowledge of Evelina's historical weaknesses to track them. "You are obsessed with the past, Silas," Evelina replied, pushing Kale behind the merchant statue. "Only because it provides the blueprint for your failure," Silas sneered. "I have followed your path from the Celestial Tower. You possess the Weaver's key. Give it to me and I will only take the human." Evelina drew a shallow, ancient blade from her boot. "That is not an offer I will consider." Silas gave a sharp, sudden command to his guards. "Take the human. Do not touch the ancient." The guards dropped swiftly into the vault. Evelina moved to intercept them, her speed immense, but she was outnumbered and her focus was divided, always needing to guard Kale. As Evelina fought with one guard, Kale, remembering the riddle, focused on the statue of the kneeling merchant. He noticed the faint outline of a pouch hanging from the statue's belt. He touched the tapestry, focusing his energy through the bond. He projected a sudden, intense mental command to the statue. "Show me the sin." The tapestry pulsed, and the magic of the vault reacted. The statue's pouch, which was merely carved stone, shimmered and then dematerialized. In its place, where the stolen goods would have been carried, was a perfectly polished, circular plate of obsidian. This was the key of the mirror, a non-reflective black plate that somehow held the reflection of every act of treachery committed near it. Kale snatched the key just as the second guard pinned him against the cold, stone wall. The guard prepared to deliver a paralyzing blow. Evelina saw the imminent threat through the bond. She couldn't reach him in time. With a desperate move, she slammed the weaver's tapestry, the first key, onto the key of the mirror, the black obsidian plate. The two sanguine keys reacted violently. A blinding, reflected flash of pure, white sunlight, the antithesis of their world, erupted from the obsidian plate, magnified by the weaver's ability to manipulate light and shadow. The guard holding Kale was instantly vaporized, not by heat, but by the impossible, blinding psychic light projected through the keys. Silas and his remaining guard shielded their eyes, howling in pain, their immortal vision overloaded. Evelina grabbed Kale. "We have the keys. We leave." They scrambled back up the shaft. As they emerged into the cold desert night, Silas, his face scorched and enraged, staggered out of the well. "You cannot run, Evelina. The third key is protected by powers you cannot comprehend. It will break your bond and deliver the human to me." He roared into the desolate emptiness. Evelina paused only long enough to look at Kale, who clutched the two keys. "He knows the next step, Kale. Find the next riddle." "No." Kale opened the chronicles, his mind buzzing with the power of the two fused keys. The next riddle was stark and chilling. "Where the god of frost weeps tears of fire, beneath the mountain that fulfills all desire, lies the key of the void bound to the heart, where life and death forever must part." The journey to the location of the third sanguine key was the most grueling yet. The riddle, where the god of frost weeps tears of fire, beneath the mountain that fulfills all desire, lies the key of the void, bound to the heart, where life and death forever must part, pointed Evelina's vast knowledge to the Kamchatka Peninsula in far eastern Russia. The mountain that fulfills all desire was an ancient spiritual moniker for Klyachevskaya Sopka, one of the highest and most active volcanoes in the region. The god of frost weeps tears of fire perfectly described the volcano's fiery, molten lava flowing down slopes permanently covered in thick glacial ice and snow. Evelina and Kale traveled as far as possible by private jet, using forged identities and massive wealth, before resorting to a brutal overland trek. The severe cold and remote wilderness were almost as dangerous as Silas's forces. Kale's human body struggled with the sub-zero temperatures. The blood bond was vital. Evelina continuously shared her unnatural heat with him, a constant low-level infusion of energy that bordered on painful for both of them, but kept Kale alive. As they neared the foot of the massive, smoking volcano, the weaver's tapestry and the key of the mirror began to thrum violently, reacting to the immense, chaotic magic of the environment. The key of the void, Evelina stated, pulling Kale behind a glacial ridge. It's the ultimate key. It binds the magic of life and death, the very essence of the original dimension. Kale looked up at the volcano, its peak hidden in a storm of ash and snow. The heart where life and death must part. It must be in the central volcanic vent, the meeting point of the Earth's fiery core and the glacial ice. Suddenly the bond screamed a different kind of alarm, a psychic ambush. Silas, Evelina hissed. He didn't wait. He knew this was the final location. Silas emerged from the swirling snow, not with guards but alone. He was heavily cloaked, his face grim, and his power emanating invisible waves of dark energy. Behind him, however, was something far more menacing, 3 tall, shadowy figures, the Elder Council's enforcers. These were the true powers of the night, ancient vampires with control over forbidden death magic. The fugitive has nowhere left to run, Evelina, Silas announced, his voice echoing in the cold air. Your mortal weakness has led you straight to your doom. The Council has authorized your termination and the cleansing of the human stain. Evelina pushed Kale slightly behind her. You cannot defeat me, Silas. My power is renewed and I have the first 2 keys. Silas smiled, a chilling, triumphant expression. The prophecy is also clear on the 3rd key, Ancient. The key of the void is protected by a sanguine ward that only the willingly sacrificed human heart can break. Your bond, Evelina, will not save you from this. It will only deliver the death blow when the human breaks. The 3 enforcers stepped forward, their shadows stretching unnaturally long. They were not interested in the keys. Their purpose was to kill Evelina. The battle began. Evelina engaged the enforcers in a devastating high-speed fight, forcing them away from Kale. She was impossibly fast and powerful, but the 3 ancients possessed coordinated death magic that slowly chipped away at her shield. Kale, knowing he was the key to the ultimate solution, disregarded the fighting. He focused on the volcano. He used the combined power of the 2 sanguine keys, the weaver's tapestry to map the hidden magic, and the key of the mirror to reflect the natural energy, and projected his consciousness towards the fiery summit. The keys responded, revealing a shimmering, pulsating energy field near the main crater, the sanguine ward. Kale climbed the icy slope, fighting against the brutal wind and thin air. He reached the ward, a solid wall of pulsing, black energy blocking the volcanic vent. He placed his hand on the ward. The magic immediately recoiled, sensing his life force. He realized Silas was right. The ward was designed to kill. It needed a life willingly given to break it. Down below, Evelina was failing. One of the enforcers had managed to sink a dark magic blade into her shoulder, causing her to cry out in a purely psychic agony that immediately transferred to Kale through the bond. Kale's vision blurred with shared pain. He knew the prophecy, bound to the heart where life and death forever must part. He had to choose, his life or their war. He looked down at the battle, at the fierce, beautiful woman fighting a hopeless battle for his sake, and he felt a fierce, absolute love that transcended humanity and immortality. Kale gripped the 2 sanguine keys and focused all his energy into the bond. He projected a final, clear message to Evelina. I love you. Complete the mission. With a deep breath, Kale willingly drove the 2 sanguine keys, the tapestry and the mirror, deep into the pulsating black energy of the ward, using his own beating heart as the conduit. The ward exploded in a blinding flash of white and crimson light. The psychic shockwave that hit Evelina was not pain, but a shattering wave of pure love, acceptance, and a final, sudden silence. Kale's heart had stopped. The bond had been violently, totally broken. Evelina crumpled, her power collapsing instantly, the enforcers descending upon her. But the sanguine ward was gone. In the center of the broken energy hovering over the fiery magma, was the final artifact, the key of the void, a swirling black crystal sphere. Silas, realizing the power that Kale's sacrifice had unleashed, lunged for the key of the void. Evelina rose, not with the fire of the ancient, but with the cold, absolute resolve of a woman who had just lost her soul. The broken bond had not killed her, but it had stripped her of all human emotion, leaving only pure, terrifying power. She reached the key of the void just as Silas did. Their hands clashed on the black crystal. He made his choice, Evelina. The human is gone. The prophecy is fulfilled. Silas screamed. No, Evelina whispered, her eyes devoid of light. The prophecy said the flaw would be made whole. She looked at the key of the void, the crystal of pure life and death. She had the two artifacts of fate and reflection, and now the key to the original dimension. In a final, impossible move, Evelina didn't fight Silas for the key. Instead, she took the two sanguine keys, tapestry and mirror, and drove them into the key of the void, merging the three into a single screaming artifact of immense power. The mountain roared. The key of the void split open, revealing a swirling, impossible gateway of purple and black energy above the volcanic vent. The Gate of Shadow. The original dimension. Silas shouted, lunging into the portal. I will take the power. I will rule. But Evelina did not follow. She turned the fused key towards the spot where Kale's body lay, lifeless on the ice. She channeled her complete, terrifying and now unfettered power, combining the Weaver's ability to manipulate fate, the Mirror's ability to reflect life, and the Void's power over life and death. She wasn't trying to bring him back. She was reweaving his soul into the eternal fabric of the bond, using the Gate of Shadow's raw energy. Kale's lifeless eyes snapped open. He was changed. His eyes now held the same immortal silver as Evelina's, and the silver scar on his neck glowed faintly. He was not a vampire, not human. He was the seer made whole, an immortal anchor bound to her essence, capable of channeling the power of the void. We choose redemption, Kale said, his voice echoing with the strange ancient power of the keys. He and Evelina faced the open Gate of Shadow, which was now threatening to spill the chaos of the original dimension into the world. They were united, eternal and whole. Together they channeled the power of the fused sanguine key and slammed it shut, sealing the threat of the original dimension forever. The gate vanished. Silas was trapped inside, permanently exiled. The power of the keys dissipated, leaving Evelina and Kale alone on the icy slopes, eternally bound, eternally whole. They had shared a coffin for one night, and their love had changed eternity. They never returned to the ancient cities. Evelina and Kale Thorne, the ancient and the seer made whole, became the silent guardians of the veil. Kale, now possessing the eternal mind of the ancient and the profound insight of the seer, was the perfect partner. Their bond was no longer a flaw. It was a silent, unbreakable source of power that ensured the balance between the mortal and immortal worlds. They were the couple that eternity could not break, destined to walk the edges of the night, forever changed by their one night in the coffin.